coming again this morning. Again, hopefully we're into May, and that means we are into spring, so we're going to talk about some basics about feet, knees, hips, keeping those areas healthy, strong, stable. So let's start with from the bottom up, basics of your feet. People don't realize there's a lot of little bones down there, 26 separate little bones. And they have to be in, this nice formation with all of those little ligaments and muscles hiding them together for it to be truly healthy. So there's 7 in the back structure, the heel, and then 19 are all of those long bones that go to the toes. So lots of little joints that potentially can get misaligned, stressed, etc. So it's no wonder that really foot problems are something I hear about at the office a lot. Again, and as a chiropractor, I will work on feet and knees and hips and backs and necks and the whole gamut. If it's a joint, it has bone structure, we're going to work on that. But indeed, people see podiatrists regularly. Feet are issues that lots of folks deal with. Typically, foot problems arise when that arch starts flashing. I'm sorry, we have an old system that says, can't support that anymore. Causing tension on that joint, ligaments, pain, stiffness results at the bottom of the foot. How many of you had something that was diagnosed as plantar fasciitis? Again, it's really very common. And again, it's in that arch of the foot, and it's from that use of the foot. Can you see okay? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Causing the greatest pain typically when you first stand up, when you first get out of bed. Because after being still for that time period, those fibers on the bottom of the foot get a little swollen, tend to go into a more contracted, tight pattern, and then you stand on them and they suddenly stretch and they say, ouch! So, some of the things we'll talk about here, what to do. Those fallen arches associated with plantar fasciitis are commonly linked with heel spurs as well. So the picture following this, those muscles and ligaments that tie the bottom of the foot structure to the heel causes that tension. It becomes that anchoring point that gets irritated. And oftentimes, again, because there's that constant tension on the plantar fascia, those fibers, your body says, oh, we have to build this up. So we're going to put calcium, minerals in that anchoring point at the heel. So it kind of looks like that. So again, that little spike that comes off the bottom of the heel is your body's attempt to repair, stabilize, strengthen a muscle tendon that's coming off, I don't trip all over this, that's following the bottom of the foot, but it now is constantly being irritated and stretched. So you end up with a heel spur, or indeed that plantar fascia that keeps getting irritated.
So does that attach to the spur then?
Correct. Well, the spur forms along that muscle fiber, along that ligament fiber. Again, it's your body's attempt to help, but often causes some irritation problems. So, some of the things you can do for those foot pain issues. Cool the bottom of that foot 2 to 3 times a day, like a frozen orange juice container, frozen water bottle, frozen tennis ball, something like that. Cool it down. Roll a golf ball under your foot, more to just kind of massage and mobilize those fibers. They're going to get a little gristly, because there is scar tissue in there, because they've been irritated. Work on keeping those fibers pliable. Strengthen your foot with things like towel scrunching. Lay that towel on the floor and use your toes to pull that towel up. Picking up the marbles, picking up a pencil is the next level perhaps, but it is working that muscle on the bottom of the foot. And certainly wear shoes that are supportive. We're going into that season where I see lots of flip-flops and such. And they're easy, and those slide-ons. But make sure they're perhaps a brand that has a little bit of an arch support, a little more structure, so it keeps that foot stable. You don't keep re-irritating the same thing.
Will this also cause pain up the back?
Sure,
the heel?
sure, because it's tied into that Achilles tendon then. Certainly if that heel's irritated, have plantar fascia, it'll go all the way up that leg, no question. So, on to the next joint, major issues. That knee joint really doesn't have a lot of bone structure that holds them together. We think about, again, the hip or the shoulder even is a little better, where there's a socket in a ball. The knee is really just two surfaces that have a little bit of a curve on this bottom surface for that upper leg bone to meet up with, but not a lot of socket structure. So it really depends on muscles, ligaments, those other fibers to hold it together. I wanted to point out. So this is the kneecap. This is looking at the front of the knee. That big muscle along the top of the thigh crosses the knee, crosses the kneecap, and then anchors on the lower leg. So oftentimes, again, a strain to your quads, you're going to feel it in your knee because of those attachments. We have the anterior, and behind it is the posterior cruciate ligaments. They crisscross in the very center of the knee. They're the ones that stabilize forward and backward, and to some degree, rotation. They tighten up to hold that knee stable during all those odd positions we put ourselves in. Then we have our lateral, the outer side, and the medial collateral ligaments, they're called. So they come on the sides of the knee. They help stabilize that sideways shifting also that we do. Then in the lower leg we have the main bone, the tibia, and the smaller one alongside the fibula. So again, those are these four ligament structures, ACL, PCL, LCL, MCL, is what you'll hear thrown around when there's knee injuries a lot, because those are the four that are most often injured, and they're the most important to stabilize the knee. So, because of that lack of bone structure that holds us in a socket, it is prone to injury. Strains and sprains, meaning strain goes with muscle injury, sprain goes with ligament injury. They're often used kind of in combination because oftentimes you have both muscle and ligament involvement. But the ACL, the anterior cruciate, one of those crisscrossers in the center, and the MCL, the medial collateral, the inside on the side of the knee, are probably the most commonly and often occur together when it's a traumatic type injury. Bursitis certainly shows up in the knee a lot. We have 4 major bursas around the knee, and they are intended to cushion the knee structure when we're in awkward positions. Keep those muscle fibers from getting frayed from all the moving and bending over these bony edges. Meniscus. The meniscus are those cushions within the knee. I'm going to back up. There's cushions, kind of like the discs we have in our spine, but it's a kind of almost a gel-like structure that's surrounded by a firmer structure to hold that cushion in place.
When that's gone, then is that when the knee is rubbing?
Bone against bone, yep. That meniscus can certainly age, wear, kind of dry out.
When they inject, is that where they inject?
Into the joint space itself, yes, to try and provide some fluid and oftentimes more to just reduce swelling in there. Certainly dislocation of the kneecap happens not as often as we age. That's probably a younger person's event, but it can happen. And of course, all of the other minor strains and sprains and such that we deal with a knee. So, if my knee hurts, which of those things is it? And that is the hard part, trying to figure out which of those elements is truly the involved element. So, as I said, the ACL and PCL, anterior cruciate, posterior cruciate, the crisscrossers, they stabilize primarily front to back movement and somewhat of the twisting because they cross. They tighten when you're turning. MCL, LCL stabilizes sideways. So if that's when your pain is more obvious, then it's probably one of those collateral ligaments. Bursas are those protective cushions. If kneeling on your knee, if there's obvious swelling all throughout the knee, that's more likely bursa involved. And the meniscus, again, is that cushion for weight bearing. And often when a meniscus is involved, it'll create almost a locking effect, that there's a tear that kind of catches in there and your body says, no, 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 don't move that knee at all.
What is it when you feel the clicking? Because people, you can even hear it.
Yeah. That tells me there's simply instability and imbalance in muscle strength and function within that complex of muscles that say you're,
Clicking.
because it actually shifts. Yeah, we're seeing some shift in the bone structure, the femur and the tibia, because say your quad versus your hamstring aren't evenly strong. So one always pulls it slightly forward. And add to that, again, that thinning of the meniscus, so it's not plump and, holding its position well. So again, typical ACL and MCL. The crisscross one, the anterior, and the inside collateral are going to be with a step and twist type motion. You'll probably catch both of them, because often that twist has a inside thrust as well. So we're going to affect that ACL deep in the joint and the MCL on the inside of that knee. And again, just the wear and tear issues can do the same thing. Bursitis, we have again some major bursas just above the kneecap, kind of on the kneecap, just below, and off to the inside again. And they're intended to cushion all of those muscle fibers from getting irritated by the things we do. And if we don't, you will have that very suddenly swollen knee. They would refer to it as housemaid's knee. If you're stuck kneeling on the floor a lot, scrubbing floors, you might end up with this or similar type activity. So be cautious. Yes, yes. Cautious with that. Meniscus injuries, often associated with those other elements that you've had some kind of unexpected twist, turn, catching yourself. So that pad, looking at it from above, that cushion that surrounds that joint structure may get a tear. Inside edge, might happen on outside edge, may follow the length of that meniscus. But again, often that means there's some fibers that are a bit loose, and you do a turn, and it shifts to the point where your knee says, oh, stop right there. And everything will just go into a sudden stop, spasm, if you will, to protect itself from further injury. So a locked knee is often a sign. But your pain is often here as well, which again is a bit confusing. Is it those collateral ligaments or is it meniscus? Because certainly some of those fibers attach to the meniscus as well. So it's often some combination of all of the above. Plus, strains to your quad, strains to your hamstring, strains to your calf. They all tie into that knee. Aging of the cartilage.
What?
Just aging. Yeah. Just that wear on the cartilage that coats the surface of those bone structures, et cetera, et cetera. So, with a significant injury, that's when, again, this new technology, use of MRI, CT scans, really comes into play. An X-ray is nice, but it shows you bone structure and some idea of what the soft tissues are doing. It's, again, this advanced imaging that will show those muscles and ligaments and tears and frays, etc. So, for most of us, though, it's not that abrupt injury. It's just the wear and tear of life, bending that leg, using it all the time. And again, over time, those tissues are aging. Indeed, that good old word arthritis comes into play. Good old arthritis. So yes, again, a healthier looking knee where there's space between the upper leg bone and the lower, and a very arthritic knee where we've lost a lot of that meniscus. The ligaments that hold it together now are somewhat lax, and your body, again, just like with a heel spur, is going to try to shore those up by adding mineral deposits along those edges, along those attachment points, and you create a joint that's not real happy with the whole idea of moving. And yet, a joint has to move to be as healthy as possible. And that's the catch-22, that you have to move it as much as it will allow to help maintain it as long as you can until that next step has to be taken. So in most cases, if it's just kind of that wear and tear, doing some basic home care will ease that pain, help re-strengthen and stabilize the joint. So knee pain, certainly if you have a flare-up for some reason, go back to that RICE protocol. Rest, ice, compress, elevate. Use some kind of knee brace when you're needing to. Limit weight bearing for a few days. Again, try not to add insult to injury. And we are very guilty of that. It starts feeling better and we think, oh, now I can finally go take care of washing that floor, doing that load of dishes, whatever. Let it go for a couple days at least. And then you start with gentle movements as soon as you can. And if that's barely getting it, to 30 degrees, so be it. You want to create movement in that joint because that's the only way, especially at the knee, that's true of all joints, that's the only way nutrients get in and out of a joint. It's a closed system. It's surrounded by this membrane. And again, the movement is what allows fluids, blood flow, nutrients, oxygen to get in, and then waste products to get out.
So how do you know when it's time?
Personal choice. Again, yeah. That's the decision you need to make with your doctor as far as, is there the next protocol that needs to be addressed?
No, I mean when it's time to start using it again. You get
I
off
see.
it for a
Okay.
few days, and then
Okay.
you know when it's time to start using it again.
Again, your knee is going to tell you, right? You're going to try being upright a little longer every day. I've been up standing for 5 minutes doing dishes and it's holding on okay. The next day, can I do 10 minutes? But you do have to go gradually. Can I walk up and down my hallway? Once, twice, 3 times. Now can I go outside and walk to the mailbox safely? Again, you just have to allow it adequate time. And we're very good at being impatient. So, some basic knee exercises. Laying, stretching that leg out, and simply contracting that upper thigh muscle so you flatten that knee. Again, very safe. Doing some straight leg raises. I like people to start maybe on a chair as opposed to laying flat with that one. Side leg raises, especially if it feels like you're dealing with some lateral, collateral ligament. Hip flexion, again, you're using that quad and you're creating some motion in that knee then. Just a hamstring curl, other way. And again, I know these are all part of the exercise programs you folks are doing here at the Senior Center. And simply a hamstring stretch. Another, again, the straight leg raise, absolutely. And knee squats are a good one. Doing the wall sit, those kind of things. But again, you start with just a few and progress. You start with a hold of 3 to 5 seconds, not 20, and go from there. And then what about the hip? The hip has, several elements that can cause painful syndromes. The joint, certainly the ball and socket, but again, in the hip, we have at least a ball and socket, a pretty deep, firm joint as compared to the knee. But we also have the SI joint at the back of the hip structure that attaches your tailbone to your ilia. So when people come in and say, my hip hurts, we have to define, is it here where the ball and socket is, or is it back here that moves more with our back motion along with our leg motion? And then, of course, lots of ligaments that hold that all together. So we have some nice images. So ball and socket joints, SI joints, sacroiliac joints. Lots of ligaments that overlie all of that. So again, our ligaments hold our skeleton together. Our muscles overlie the ligaments and move those bones and joints. So front view, back view of the hip, So hamstring, quad muscles. And then here also, we have those bursas. A bursa is, again, intended to cushion those bony points primarily so the muscles don't get frayed. So most hip pain is associated with the itises. Tendinitis, bursitis, arthritis. Tendinitis, inflammation, irritation of muscle fibers, muscle tendons. Bursitis, inflammation of those bursas, those cushions. Or arthritis, inflammation, swelling, and changes in the actual bone structure that happen from ongoing irritation. Tendinitis, probably the most common, and we do this to ourselves from little on, that we overstretch unexpected events, and either at the major part of the muscle belly it's called, but more commonly it's where that larger mass narrows down to the muscle tendon. And it's the tendon that anchors to our skeleton. So often it's the tendinitis that happens, that we irritate that. Overuse, repetitive use, sudden overstretches. Again, this time of year, gardening, raking, house cleaning, again, we overdo it. We use the same motion a lot because we want to get this job done. Break it up. Bursitis, again, present around that hip, a major one right on the side here by that bony point. They provide that cushion, but again, overuse creates simply a friction type event that can irritate that bursa surface and the surrounding muscle structure. So it gets inflamed. And a risk with bursa, because they tend to be close to the surface, is there a break in the skin that then provides a site for infection? And then they really swell up and get red, et cetera, et cetera. So again, a swollen, hot joint you want to take care of promptly. And of course, arthritis. So we get the spacing gets narrowed in that joint. We lose the cushion. There's bone spurring. There's bone bridging in the event that those spurs actually connect. And it typically causes, that pain, stiffness that persists both with movement and even without movement, that it's just there, that joint is not able to be at ease. So basic care more for, again, those minor ends of strain, sprain, overuse, wear and tear. Again, if it's an itis, if it's acting like an itis, do the rest. Elevate if appropriate. Compress. Ice that a lot. Go ahead, use an anti-inflammatory, ibuprofen, things of that nature. And symptoms should improve within a couple days. Again, if that's not the case, then that's when you decide, is this something I need to see someone else and get some additional help with?
Ice is better than heat?
When you first irritate things, yes. You want to reduce that inflammation and swelling. Heat will often feel good because it relaxes that area. It encourages blood flow, and I'm okay with that. But you're probably going to add a little more swelling to an area that's already swollen, and that causes additional stress on those tissues.
But they always said heat helped to remove the swelling.
And I disagree. Yeah, I disagree. Again, at least
They
initially.
always taught you years
Right.
ago,
At
use
least,
heat.
yeah, correct. And I'm going to say the first day or two, you're going to use cool. After that, after the first 48, 72 hours for sure, then I'm going to encourage alternating. Cool, switch right away to heat, then back to cool. Flush the area with that change in temperature. That will help your body figure out how to bring in nutrients but get the waste products out of that region. Once symptoms are eased, whether it's your foot or knee or hip, your best defense always is to keep that joint complex and all of those components strong and stable. And that's the challenge for all of us. It's finding that point at which, yeah, it's feeling pretty good. Now, how do I keep it there? And being consistent with some regular stretch, because you need to keep it flexible, and strength is your best defense. So, basic care. use that supportive garment or sleeve or brace, something of that sort. If you have that weak link knee or ankle or hip, be smart. Wear that supportive garment when you know you're going to be doing tasks that are going to test it, challenge it. Put it on. Break those tasks up into smaller increments so you can allow that area to rest and recover between. Don't give yourself a deadline that's unreasonable. Allow yourself rest and recovery breaks. Again, your family and friends are going to understand. If they're coming to visit you, they're coming to visit you, not your house. Do preventive RICE methods. If indeed you've done a little more than your knee or hip or foot is happy with, rest it, ice it, use a compress, elevate if that's appropriate.
How'd you get him to name it after?
I know it.
It's advertising.
Yes, it is. It is. And what's one of the best activities for all three joints? Walking. There's no question. If you are able to do any walking, do it regularly. Even if that means, again, very short stints, very sporadic through the day, so be it. No matter where you are today, self-care can make a difference. You just have to fit it into your routine. Find the time frame that works for you. Not necessarily for your neighbor or your kids or whatever, for you. And we know the Senior Center offers lots of great opportunities to help you maintain that strength and flexibility all over so you can keep moving. Stay active. Thanks for joining me. Happy spring. This is my granddaughter. That's Lila down in Texas. I was just down there. Thank you. Yes. And she turned a big sister in March. She has a little brother Gideon now, so another reason to go down to Texas once in a while. So, hope that, again, answers a few questions, help you understand the mechanics, the structure in those areas to give you more reason to, okay, I got to help this stay strong, despite what your hips or knees or feet have been through in the past.
There's to say Versa lubricated the joints.
No, that's more
You remember when they
synovial.
said that?
Well, I don't know that I've heard that term because it's bursas are cushions. They're like little pillows of fluid. But again, they can get irritated and inflamed and cause a lot of trouble. And like with all of those things, once they have been injured, as I've said before, especially muscle, ligament fibers, those soft tissues are going to heal, but they will never be quite the same as original. The scar tissue that's used to heal those tissues doesn't have the same flexibility or tensile strength as that original. So it's going to tend to be the spot that's irritated first the next time, and the next time, and the next time. So again, you do the best you can to protect those weak links when you need to and keep the surrounding structure strong to help support it. Okay. All right. You're welcome. Happy May. We'll see you sometime this summer. Haven't committed to anything yet.